July 25, 1944, Operation Cobra. At first light, the Allies unleashed the mission that would rip open Hitler's Western Front. After 7 punishing weeks in the Normandy hedgerows, the US First Army had already paid over 40,000 casualties just to reach Saint-Lô. Across the lines, the elite Panzer Lehr Division bled more than 1,000 men in most of its tanks. But nothing compared to what came next. From the sky roared 2,300 bombers and fighter bombers, dropping over 4,000 tons of explosives on a target barely 3 miles wide. The ground convulsed, entire regiments vanished, and even American soldiers were caught in the blast, over 130 killed by friendly fire, including Lieutenant General Lesley McNair. Within weeks, the retreat became a rout. The US Army would smash the German left flank, trap tens of thousands of enemy troops, and trigger one of the fastest collapses of the war. At Falaise, Argentan, more than 10,000 Germans were killed and 50,000 captured as Allied forces closed the trap. What happened after this day would rewrite the map of Europe, and you won't believe how close it came to disaster. After D-Day's triumph, Allied leaders imagined sweeping advances across open fields toward Paris. Instead, they ran headlong into a nightmare called the bocage, centuries-old farm walls, earthen banks topped with tangled hedges and trees turned every small field into a fortress. Sunken lanes offered perfect ambush sites. Machine guns, mortars, and hidden Panzerschrecks waited behind every bend. Progress was measured in yards, not miles. Tanks struggled to climb the steep banks and often exposed their bellies to German fire. American troops inched forward field by field, sometimes taking a full day to capture a single hedgerow. By mid-July, the cost was staggering. To seize the ruined crossroads city of Saint-Lô alone, US forces suffered roughly 40,000 casualties. The British and Canadians bled heavily around Caen, while German losses mounted, but they bought precious time. The Allies had stormed ashore, expecting rapid movement. Instead, they faced a grinding, close-quarters war that threatened to choke the invasion to death. If something bold didn't break the deadlock soon, the summer of 1944 could end with the Western Front still locked in Normandy. Inside a canvas tent near Saint-Lô, Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, commander of the US First Army, studied a wall-sized map late into the night. He knew that another slow grind through the hedgerows would bleed his soldiers white and waste the Allies' advantage in numbers and air power. Bradley envisioned something different, a narrow, violent breakthrough. He drew a rectangle 3.5 miles wide and 1.5 miles deep across the German line south of Saint-Lô. Into that box, he would call the full weight of Allied air power, thousands of heavy bombers, medium bombers, and fighter bombers dropping over 4,000 tons of explosives in a matter of hours. Once the earth stopped shaking, 7 corps under Lightning Joe Collins would surge forward with 3 veteran infantry divisions, the 4th, 9th, and 30th. They would open a defended corridor for 1st Infantry Division, 2nd Armored, and 3rd Armored to pour through, aiming first for Marigny and Saint-Gilles, then racing toward Coutances and Avranches, the gateway to Brittany and the open country beyond. Bradley was blunt with his staff. This thing must be bold. If the Germans get set again, we go right back to hedgerow fighting, and you can't make any speed. The plan was daring, dangerous, and potentially decisive. Its code name, Operation Cobra. While Bradley shaped Cobra in the west, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery prepared a massive supporting blow on the eastern flank to keep German armor pinned near Caen. On 18 July 1944, the British Second Army launched Operation Goodwood, a thunderous assault designed to bleed German reserves and hold them in place. More than 2,100 Allied bombers and heavy guns blanketed German positions east and southeast of Caen, unleashing over 8,000 tons of bombs in a single day. 3 British armored divisions, the Guards, 7th, and 11th, drove forward across the open plain, aiming for Falaise. The attack met ferocious resistance from Panzer Group West, which had entrenched in 3 defensive lines and concentrated its lethal 88mm guns. By nightfall, British forces had captured key ground and drawn in German reserves, but at a staggering cost. About 500 tanks destroyed and roughly 2,600 men killed, wounded, or captured over 3 days. Goodwood did not achieve a breakout, but it accomplished something even more valuable for Bradley. It fixed the bulk of German armor around Caen, ensuring that the western sector, the very zone Bradley intended to smash open, was left dangerously thin. As July wore on, the weather became a new enemy. Operation Cobra was scheduled for July 24, but heavy clouds repeatedly blanketed Normandy. When skies finally began to clear, the order to launch went out only to be canceled mid-mission as conditions worsened. Not every pilot received the recall. Nearly 400 aircraft dropped about 685 tons of bombs anyway. With bombers forced to fly directly over US lines instead of parallel, tragedy followed. Explosives landed short, killing 25 Americans and wounding 131 of the 30th Infantry Division before the ground assault even began. General Bradley was shocked. He had specifically requested 100-pound fragmentation bombs to avoid deep craters and wanted lateral flight paths to reduce risk. But air commanders argued the lateral runs were too narrow and too exposed to flak. In the confusion, German commander Fritz Behrlein of Panzer Lehr Division moved troops into the very ground the Americans had temporarily vacated, unknowingly placing them directly inside the next day's kill zone. The stage was set for a bombardment even more massive and more deadly than originally planned. 11 a.m., July 25, 1944, the sky over Normandy roared to life. Wave after wave of Allied aircraft descended on a 3-mile front. First came 350 fighter bombers, strafing and bombing for 20 minutes. Then 1,800 heavy bombers of the U.S. 8th Air Force followed, shaking the earth with high explosive and fragmentation bombs. After them, another 350 fighter bombers and nearly 400 medium bombers slammed the southern half of the target. In barely 2.5 hours, over 2,300 planes dropped more than 4,000 tons of explosives. Eyewitness Ernie Pyle wrote that the earth rose and rattled, daylight dimmed beneath a wall of dust, and the sound was like the end of the world. For German defenders, chiefly the battered Panzer Lehr Division, it was annihilation. Command posts disappeared, communications collapsed, tanks were flipped or buried. Entire companies were wiped out. Behrlein later said several of his men went mad, running in the open until cut down by shrapnel. But once again, tragedy touched the attackers. Misaligned bomb runs and premature releases sent ordnance short of the Saint-Lô-Perrier road, killing 111 more Americans and wounding nearly 500, among them Lieutenant General Lesley McNair, the highest-ranking U.S. officer to die in Europe. Despite the heartbreak, the German front was staggering on the edge of collapse. With the skies finally silent, Lieutenant General Lightning Joe Collins' 7 Corps surged forward. 3 infantry divisions, the 4th, 9th, and 30th, led the charge, pushing through a battlefield now pocked with overlapping bomb craters and littered with destroyed German guns and armor. The ground was so torn that tanks crawled, and infantry sometimes waded chest-deep through soft earth. At first, the resistance seemed broken. An assault battalion of the 330th Infantry Regiment advanced 800 yards in just 40 minutes, but German survivors of the bombing soon rallied. Hidden machine guns and anti-tank teams opened fire from hedgerows and orchards. Progress slowed to hundreds of yards per hour. To the west, the 30th Division ran headlong into Panther tanks and strongpoints. After intense fighting and careful flanking, American troops destroyed a dozen German armored vehicles and seized key crossroads late at night. In the center, the 4th Division's 8th Infantry fought a brutal orchard battle, using Sherman tanks and bazookas to blast defenders from a sunken lane and reach the village of La Chapelle-en-Jugger. By dusk on July 25, the Americans had advanced only about 2 miles less than planned. Yet beneath that modest gain lay a decisive fact. Panzer Lehr was shattered. Its losses exceeded 1/3 of its remaining men, and its armor was almost gone. The German defense line, though still firing, was fatally cracked and losing cohesion. July 26, 1944. Despite only partial infantry objectives met, Lieutenant General Omar Bradley took a calculated gamble. Commit the armor now. He ordered Major General Edward Brooks's 2nd Armored Division and Combat Command B of the 3rd Armored Division, along with the motorized 1st Infantry Division, to surge through the breach and exploit the shaken German line. Brigadier General Maurice Rose's Combat Command A of the 2nd Armored led the way. Passing through the 30th Division, Rose's tanks powered south across the Saint-Lô-Perrier's road, blasting isolated gun nests and shrugging off scattered anti-tank fire. Fighter bombers overhead destroyed 4 Panzer IV tanks and a tank destroyer that briefly slowed the advance. By midday, Rose's spearhead captured St. Gilles, a key junction, and pushed on through the night toward Canesy, barely pausing as German units collapsed or fled. To the west, the 1st Infantry Division and the 3rd Armored fought their way into Marigny, finally securing it by July 27 after fierce resistance. The tempo of battle had transformed. What began as a slow, hedgerow-bound grind now became open country warfare. Bradley's gamble paid off. By committing armor early, he turned a fragile breach into a widening corridor that the Germans could no longer seal. By July 27, the American drive was a full-on surge. With St. Gilles secure, Bradley ordered an unrelenting push to the west and south. The goal, Coutances, the road hub whose capture would slice off German escape routes, and then Avranches, the gateway to Brittany and open terrain. The 1st Infantry Division and 3rd Armored Division hammered through German rearguards around Marigny and high ground beyond. Meanwhile, 2nd Armored's columns, under General Maurice Rose, thundered toward Coutances, striking scattered pockets of resistance before they could regroup. German communications were shattered. Survivors from Panzer Lehr and other battered units fought piecemeal, often unaware of orders from higher command. On July 28, Bradley officially gave operational control to George S. Patton, whose 3rd Army was set to activate within days. Patton wasted no time. He flung the 4th and 6th Armored Divisions through the Cobra breach. Fighter bombers smashed a massive log roadblock near Bray Hall, clearing the way. By nightfall on July 29, the 6th Armored had advanced 12 miles with minimal losses, while the 4th Armored bridged the Seine River and split into 2 swift columns. One column stormed through scattered German defenses. The other discovered intact bridges across the Seine and entered Avranches virtually unopposed. The road to Brittany and to a true breakout across France now lay wide open. While American armor poured through Avranches, the German high command unraveled. Field Marshal Günther von Kluge, now responsible for the collapsing Western Front, struggled to contact his shattered units. Phone lines were cut, courier routes were overrun. He called the situation Riesensorry, one hell of a mess. Kluge warned Berlin that if the Americans held Avranches, they would be out of the woods and able to do whatever they want. Yet Hitler refused to release the 200,000 men of 15th Army still waiting at Pas-de-Calais for an invasion that would never come. Meanwhile, Patton's 3rd Army erupted into open country. 8 Corps dashed 200 miles west to Brest in under a week, while other columns drove toward Le Mans and Chartres. By mid-August, American spearheads were sweeping toward the Seine. Allied forces now closed a deadly trap east of the breakthrough. Near Falaise and Argentan, Canadian, British, and US forces encircled the remnants of the German 7th and 5th Panzer armies. The result was catastrophic. Over 10,000 Germans killed and some 50,000 captured, with 200 tanks destroyed in the cauldron. Operation Cobra had not only smashed the German left flank, it had triggered a chain reaction that crushed the entire Normandy defense. Operation Cobra transformed the Allied campaign in Western Europe. What began as a desperate attempt to escape the Normandy hedgerows became the springboard for a lightning advance across France. In just over a month, Patton's 3rd Army drove 400 miles, liberated 50,000 square miles of territory, and captured tens of thousands of German soldiers. By early September, his spearheads had crossed the River Seine, reached Verdun, and stood on the doorstep of Germany itself. Strategically, Cobra proved that air-ground coordination on a massive scale could smash even the strongest defensive lines. It showed that deception operations like Fortitude, which kept the German 15th Army frozen near Pas-de-Calais, could decide the fate of battles hundreds of miles away. Most importantly, it shifted the entire rhythm of the war. After Cobra, the Allies dictated the pace, and the Germans could only react. The cost was high, over 40,000 American casualties in the approach to St. Lo, at least 130 dead from friendly fire in the opening bombardment, and untold civilian losses. But the reward was decisive. Cobra turned a bloody stalemate into fast-moving warfare, making the liberation of Paris, the fall of the German Western Front, and ultimately the collapse of the Third Reich inevitable.